Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, thank you for your wonderful service to our country. I just wanted to echo what Senator Wicker mentioned, Senator Colonel Wicker, in terms of General Mattis's comments yesterday about the strategic aspects from a national security perspective of the national debt that we've racked up over the last several years, 18 trillion and increasing. So I think we all see that we're struggling with the issues of sequestration, with the issues of readiness, but with the broader issues of how our fiscal situation in this country actually impacts national security. So appreciate the testimony here. I also appreciate the focus on what's happening, what potentially could be happening with regard to training, readiness, morale, particularly given the global security threats that I know that we all recognize are out there. Similar to Senator Shaheen, I also like to focus a little bit more, though, on local impacts. I think it's important that the people that we represent also hear what the potential for local impacts could be with regard to sequestration. I'm sure all of you gentlemen would agree that Alaska is one of the most strategic, most important military places that we have in this country, whether it's missile defense, world-class unrivaled training, areas and ranges, a platform for rapid deployment into the Asia-Pacific, into Eurasia. You'll be hearing me talk about that a little bit in some of our hearings. I'm sure my colleagues will as well. But the large number of Army and Air Force bases and personnel in Alaska, I think, is a testament to the important geostrategic location and training. General Welch, you mentioned the importance of training. As you know, Jay Park in Alaska is probably the premier airspace for Air Force training in the world, larger than several American states. And General Odierno, I know that you're heading up to Alaska soon, sir. We're looking forward to that. I wanted to let you know there was an article today in the Alaska Dispatch. It mentioned how the Army is looking to eliminate 120,000 positions, looking at potentially 30 installations that could be impacted, including a couple combat brigades, possibly from Fort Rich or Fort Wainwright in Alaska. Obviously, this is having big concerns in my state. Can you, is sequestration driving this focus in the Army to look at 30 different installations, including brigades in Alaska? Is that something that's being driven directly by sequestration?
It is being driven directly by sequestration and the fact that we will have to reduce significantly the amount of forces that we have in our active component and National Guard and Reserve component. And so we have to, throughout all of the United States and overseas, we'll have to take reductions. And every installation could be affected as we make these decisions.
So that exercise right now that's described in the Alaska Dispatch is a direct result of you preparing for sequestration?
Direct result, yes, sir.
Okay. General Welch, I know that the F-35s is a top program with regard to the Air Force. Alaska, as you know, is a front runner for future F-35 basing, something that we're quite excited about. I think it would be great not only for Alaska but for the country, given our location. I look forward to having future discussions with you on how to cement that decision. But I actually wanted to ask you about the impact of sequestration on that program. If there is any, if the future basing could be delayed or undermined with regard to the F-35s, is that something that would also or could also be impacted by sequestration?
Senator, if sequestration occurred again in 16, it might be necessary to defer some of the aircraft buy in FY16 out of 16. And the details of that will be in our budget rollout. We'll be able to discuss those in detail with you and your staff beginning next week. But that is a possibility. We have defended this program, as you know, from the beginning as a priority program for us. And so we hope that does not become reality. That would not, by the way, put the initial operational capability date at risk in my view. And clearly, your emphasis on the strategic benefits of the state of Alaska and the training capability at Jay Park are pretty well supported by the decisions we are trying to make with F-22 bed down already made, tanker bed down already made, and now consideration of Eielson as the leading candidate for our Pacific bed down. So I would agree with everything you said about the location and its strategic value.
Yes, sir. Thank you. And again, I look forward to having that discussion in more depth with you and other members of your staff. General Dunford, you mentioned, and actually several of you mentioned your experience with when you initially joined the service, kind of the hollow Army or the hollow Marine Corps. Could you provide a little bit more details, any of you or all of you, quickly on specifics of kind of then and now, when you joined the service, saw the initial kind of hollow military versus the high level of training that we've had with regard to our troops and readiness?
Senator, I would start by talking about the quality of people. In the aggregate, there's absolutely no comparison between the quality of the men and women that we have in uniform today and the quality that we had in the wake of Vietnam during the late 1970s. We certainly had some very, very good people, but the comparison I would make today in the quality of people would be very significant. But really what was going on in the 1970s is we didn't have sufficient money to train. And so the training was not effective, our capabilities weren't growing. We didn't have significant amount of money to take care of our infrastructure and our barracks. And frankly, I can remember days of asbestos carpeting, lead pipes, raw sewage in the barracks in conditions of habitability that frankly we were embarrassed about in the 1970s. But I think, the one thing that's different today than the 1970s is the spirit, the will, and the discipline of the force, in addition to being very well equipped. Of course, much of the equipment we had was old, but the most important thing are the intangible qualities of the force today. And again, we've all spoken about trust. We've all spoken about the ability to predict the support that you're going to have when you go to harm's way. And all of those things have given us that spirit and will and discipline. And that's the thing I'd be most concerned about losing is the quality of the force and those characteristics that we see in our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines today.